In extreme cold survival exam, the shelter's fragile walls shudder as an ice beast attacks. Captain Leah Turner lunges forward with makeshift weapons, surprising the crystalline predator. In a desperate gambit, she drives her knife deep into its glowing eye. The creature retreats, and the diverse alien cadets erupt in celebration, their shared struggle against extinction forging an unbreakable bond across species. The brutal wind howled across the frozen plains of Glacius de Fois, carrying ice crystals that cut like microscopic blades against any exposed surface. The desolate ice desert stretched endlessly beneath a sky devoid of sunlight. The planet's distant star offering no warmth to the barren landscape below. Daytime temperatures hovered around 30 degrees C, but as night approached, they would plummet to a deadly 60 degrees C, with sudden snowstorms that could materialize without warning. Captain Leah Turner stood at the shuttle bay door, her breath forming dense clouds in the frigid air. At 28, the former Arctic rescue specialist had been hastily recruited into the Interplanetary Survival Corps after her exemplary performance during the North Pole crisis back on Earth. Her extensive experience in extreme cold environments made her uniquely qualified among humans for this position. But even she felt the bite of Glacius Umphinth's unforgiving atmosphere through her thermal gear. Behind her, 50 cadets from various species shuffled nervously. The Orthions, with their normally resilient scale-covered bodies, were already showing signs of stress, tiny fractures appearing in their protective outer layers. The soft-furred selenids huddled together, their delicate filaments beginning to stiffen in the cold. Most concerning were the gaseous vortex, whose vaporous forms were partially condensing into dangerous liquid states at the edges of their containment suits. "Attention all cadets!" The announcement echoed across the landing zone, the automated voice somehow even colder than the air itself. "The extreme cold survival exam commences now. Duration, 72 hours. No external assistance will be provided. Your performance will be evaluated based on individual survival and the number of fellow cadets you managed to keep alive." The rules had been clear during their briefing. No heating equipment allowed, weapons limited to a small utility knife, and only 3 personal items of choice. Leah had selected a fire starter, a collapsible water container, and a multi-tool, all proven essentials from her Earth expeditions. As the shuttle door fully retracted, the full force of Glacius Umphinth's early morning gale swept through the compartment. Several cadets stumbled backward, unprepared for the intensity. One of the vortex partially vaporized in panic, their cohesion field flickering dangerously. "Begin countdown. 72 hours starting now." The announcement concluded as the shuttle's engines roared to life. The vehicle would return in 3 days, assuming anyone remained alive to board it. The majority of the cadets stood frozen, both literally and figuratively, overwhelmed by the sudden exposure. Several of the Orthians' scales cracked audibly in the extreme temperature shift. The selenids' fur began to frost over almost immediately, their movements becoming sluggish. Leah didn't waste time with hesitation. She pulled her thermal hood tighter and plunged forward into the storm. Her eyes narrowed against the onslaught of snow and ice. Survival here would require immediate shelter. Standing exposed was a death sentence, especially for the non-human species whose physiologies were even less adapted to these conditions than her own. "Follow in single file," she shouted over her shoulder, though her voice was nearly lost in the howling wind. "Stay close to the person ahead of you." The blizzard intensified as they moved away from the landing site, visibility reducing to mere meters. Leah relied on her training, scanning the horizon for any geological features that might offer natural protection. After 20 minutes of grueling progress through knee-deep snow, she spotted what she was looking for: a range of ice formations rising from the otherwise flat terrain. With renewed determination, she altered course toward them. The ice mountains loomed larger as they approached, their crystalline surfaces refracting what little light penetrated the storm clouds. Leah methodically examined the base of the formations, looking for a suitable location to establish shelter. Finally, she discovered a narrow crevice between two massive ice walls, a natural windbreak that could serve as the foundation for their survival. "Here!" she called, gesturing for the trailing cadets to gather. Only about 30 had managed to keep pace with her. The others had either fallen behind or chosen different directions, choices that significantly reduced their chances of survival. Without delay, Leah removed her utility knife and began to work. She had spotted the carcass of a native creature, some manner of six-limbed, thick-furred beast that had succumbed to the elements, partially buried in a snowdrift nearby. The creature's remains would provide essential materials. Using her knife and the creature's own bones, which she harvested with practiced efficiency, Leah began to cut the tough hide from her outer jacket lining. The specially treated synthetic material would serve as a makeshift tarpaulin. "I need 3 volunteers with manual dexterity," she called to the shivering cadets. A Norvsian with 4 arms stepped forward, along with 2 Orthions, whose scales seemed less damaged than their companions. "We're going to expand this crevice," Leah explained, pointing to the narrow opening in the ice wall. "We need it just wide enough to enter, but small enough to conserve heat." Working together, they used the sharpened bones and Leah's tools to carefully chip away at the ice, gradually carving a passage that led deeper into the formation. After an hour of labor, they had created a small chamber that Leah dubbed Echo 1, a nod to her first solo shelter during Arctic training. "Now for insulation," she instructed, directing the cadets to help line the floor with alternating layers of animal hide and crushed ice. The design created air pockets that would trap warmth while providing a barrier against the frozen ground. As the shelter took shape, Leah conducted perimeter patrols, collecting additional materials. She discovered the remains of several selenids who had not survived the initial exposure, their delicate bodies overcome by the cold. With silent respect for the fallen, she carefully gathered their fur and remaining intact skin, noting their identities for the exam records. These materials would reinforce the shelter's roof and entrance. By nightfall of the first day, Echo 1 had evolved from a simple ice cave into a surprisingly effective shelter. The entrance was covered with a flap made from the synthetic tarpaulin and secured with bone fasteners. Inside, the temperature remained significantly higher than the exterior, which had now dropped to 45 degrees as darkness fell. Leah organized the surviving cadets by species, positioning them to maximize heat retention. The remaining selenids, with their insulating fur, were placed at the center, where they could benefit from the collective warmth, while simultaneously providing insulation for others. "Rest in shifts," she instructed. 4 hours on, 4 off. Those awake maintain the shelter and watch for threats. As the second day dawned, the first casualties among the sheltered cadets became apparent. An Orthion had developed severe frostbite on its lower extremities, while a selenid's wings had frozen solid, the delicate membranes likely permanently damaged. Without hesitation, Leah ventured out into the storm again. The blizzard had intensified overnight, reducing visibility to almost zero. She moved methodically in expanding circles around the shelter, searching for any cadets who might have constructed inadequate protection or become disoriented. She found a vortex whose containment field was failing, their gaseous form dangerously close to complete phase transition. With careful movements, she adjusted the field generator and helped the weakened alien back toward Echo 1. Along the way, they encountered 2 more survivors, a limping Orthion and a Norvsian whose lower arms had ceased functioning. One by one, Leah brought them back to the shelter, applying body heat where appropriate and administering minimal rations from her emergency supply. The shelter was becoming crowded, necessitating expansion. Using the techniques they had developed the previous day, Leah directed the creation of an adjoining chamber. She used the larger bones from the native creature to carve ventilation holes at specific intervals, preventing carbon dioxide buildup while minimizing heat loss. "We need to organize our resources more efficiently," she announced, gathering the most able-bodied cadets. Ration bars should be divided into thirds, one portion per day. Water from melted ice must be stored in these hide pouches and shared according to each species' minimum requirements. The logistics were complex, given the diverse physiological needs of the various alien species. Leah drew upon her xenobiology training, calculating approximate metabolic rates and essential intake for each cadet. It would be tight, but with proper management, they could sustain everyone for the remaining test period. As important as physical needs were psychological ones. Leah recognized the growing despair among some of the cadets, particularly those suffering from injuries or physiological distress due to the cold. "Breathe in rhythm," she instructed, demonstrating a controlled breathing pattern designed to calm the autonomic nervous system, or its equivalent in alien physiologies. "Focus on the present moment, the next breath, the next heartbeat." She assigned tasks to everyone capable of movement, having them arrange the animal hide blankets in a circular pattern around a central gathering point where body heat could be concentrated. The activity itself generated warmth, while giving the cadets a sense of purpose and control over their situation. By the evening of the second day, their collective efforts had transformed Echo 1 into a surprisingly sophisticated shelter. The main chamber now connected to two smaller annexes, one for storing supplies and one for those requiring special care due to injuries. The ventilation system worked efficiently, and a small, carefully controlled fire burned in a pit lined with stones, fed by animal fat and bone. Leah was conducting a final exterior check before nightfall when she noticed something unusual, a set of tracks in the snow that didn't match any of the cadets' footprints. These were massive, with claw marks that dug deep into the ice, and they circled the perimeter of their shelter before disappearing back into the storm. Through a narrow observation slit, Leah monitored the area surrounding the shelter. As night deepened and temperatures plummeted further, she caught a glimpse of movement, a massive shadow shifting against the white landscape. It was some form of native predator, its body seemingly formed of living ice with crystalline protrusions and eyes that glowed with an eerie blue light. "We need to prepare defenses," she whispered urgently to the cadets nearest the entrance. "Something's out there, and it's interested in us." With quiet efficiency, they arranged sharp-edged hide panels to create a barrier across the entrance passage. Sharpened bones were positioned as makeshift spears, angled outward to deter any creature attempting to force its way inside. The atmosphere inside Echo 1 grew tense as the cadets heard the creature circling their shelter. Its movements produced an unsettling sound, part growl, part crystalline chime, as though ice itself had gained sentience and hunger. Without warning, the beast charged. The ice walls of the shelter shuddered as the creature slammed against them, seeking entry. Chips of ice rained down from the ceiling as fissures spread across the structure. "Hold position!" Leah commanded, her voice steady despite the danger. She gripped her utility knife in one hand and a bone spear in the other, positioning herself at the entrance, where the creature was now clawing and biting at the hide barrier. The barrier wouldn't hold much longer. Making a split-second decision, Leah thrust aside the covering and lunged forward, using the element of surprise. The ice beast reared back momentarily, its crystalline form towering above her. In that brief moment of confusion, Leah drove her makeshift spear toward a vulnerable point, the glowing organ that appeared to be its eye. The creature roared, a sound like glaciers calving, and swept one massive paw toward her. Leah rolled beneath the strike, came up on one knee, and with a powerful upward thrust, drove her knife deep into the glowing eye structure. There was a flash of blue light, and the creature recoiled violently, flinging Leah several meters across the snow. She landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, but immediately scrambled back to her feet, ready to continue the fight. But the ice beast was retreating, moving erratically as the damaged eye structure flickered and dimmed. With a final cry that echoed across the frozen wasteland, it disappeared into the storm. Inside the shelter, the cadets who had witnessed the confrontation broke into spontaneous cheers and vocalizations unique to their species. The Orthions performed a rhythmic clicking of their scales, while the Selenids' fur rippled in patterns that expressed admiration. Even the normally stoic Norvsians raised all four arms in a gesture of respect. Leah returned to the shelter, bruised but triumphant. The encounter had done more than just eliminate an immediate threat. It had galvanized the diverse group of cadets, creating a shared experience that transcended their biological differences. The shelter had sustained damage during the attack, with one wall partially collapsed. Without prompting, the cadets organized themselves into repair teams, reinforcing the weakened sections and improving the overall structure based on lessons learned. What had begun as a group of frightened individuals had transformed into a cohesive unit. The Orthions, whose scales had initially cracked in the cold, now used those same fractured pieces to maintain a small, controlled fire. The Selenids, once victims of the extreme temperature, now deliberately fluffed their fur to create insulating layers for the more vulnerable species. The Vortex, whose gaseous nature had seemed a liability, discovered they could circulate through the smallest cracks in the shelter, identifying structural weaknesses before they became dangerous. The Norvsians used their multiple limbs to efficiently manage supplies and tend to injured cadets. As the third day dawned, their final full day on Glacius Thruendel, Leah organized preparation for extraction. Using the largest remaining piece of synthetic hide, she carved the Universal Distress Signal, SOS, in large, clear letters. This was positioned outside the shelter entrance, weighted down with stones against the persistent wind. A small fire pit was constructed at a safe distance from the shelter, filled with animal fat and bone that would produce a thick, visible smoke when ignited, a signal that would be easily spotted by the returning shuttle. 24 more hours, Leah told the gathered cadets, her voice confident despite their haggard appearance. We leave together, all of us. The final night on Glacius Thruendel was the coldest yet, with temperatures dropping to a record 67 degrees. The shelter creaked and groaned under the extreme conditions, but the reinforcements held. Huddled together in species-appropriate groupings, the cadets shared what remained of their rations and water, some recounting stories from their homeworlds in whispered tones. Leah maintained a vigilant watch, rotating between observation points and checking on the most vulnerable cadets. The ice beast did not return, but other, smaller creatures occasionally approached the shelter, drawn by the scent of the survivors within. None posed a significant threat, but their presence was a reminder that Glacius Thruendel was a living ecosystem, not merely a frozen wasteland. As dawn broke on the final day, Leah ignited the signal fire. Thick, black smoke rose into the clearing sky, creating a stark contrast against the white landscape. Inside the shelter, the cadets gathered their few possessions and prepared for evacuation. The distant hum of engines was the first indication that rescue was approaching. It grew steadily louder until the shuttle appeared on the horizon, its lights cutting through the lingering haze of the storm. "They've spotted us," Leah announced as a confirmation signal flashed from the shuttle's exterior lights. The support team descended by cable, their specialized environmental suits allowing them to move efficiently across the ice. They guided the cadets from the shelter to the waiting shuttle, providing emergency medical assessment as they went. Of the 50 cadets who had begun the exam, 32 had survived, an unprecedented success rate for the extreme cold survival exam on Glacius Thruendel. 28 of those survivors had been sheltered in Echo 1 under Leah's leadership. Back at the Interplanetary Survival Academy, a formal commendation ceremony was held. Leah stood at attention as the Academy commander, a towering Norvsian with ceremonial markings on all four arms, presented her with the Survival Excellence Medallion. Captain Turners, Human-built shelter methodology will be established as the standard template for ice planet survival training, the commander announced to the assembled faculty and cadets. Her innovative use of native materials, efficient thermal management, and exceptional leadership have set a new benchmark for survival in extreme cold environments. As the ceremony concluded, Leah found herself surrounded by the cadets she had led through the ordeal. Their expressions of gratitude transcended language and species barriers. The vortex pulsed in harmonious patterns. The Orthions presented her with a scale from their own bodies, a gesture of highest respect in their culture. And the Selenids created an intricate dance of light through their reflective fur. Later, standing alone at the observation deck overlooking the academy grounds, Leah gazed toward the distant ice ranges of Glacius Thurimbin. She thought of the diverse group who had become her companions through those 3 harrowing days. "The ice only tests us," she murmured, echoing an old Earth saying from her Arctic training days. "But it's human warmth that keeps us alive." As she turned to leave, she noticed something unexpected. The Academy's senior xenobiologist had updated the species adaptation chart for extreme environments. In the column for Glacius Thurimbin, every species now had an asterisk beside their survival rating, with a footnote that read, "Survival rates significantly improved with human-led cooperative shelter strategy." Leah smiled quietly to herself. The next time cadets faced the frozen wastes of Glacius Thurimbin, they would go prepared not just with knowledge of ice and cold, but with an understanding that survival sometimes meant reaching across species boundaries and finding strength in unexpected places. The ice beast's attack had nearly destroyed their shelter, but it had built something far more durable, a template for interspecies cooperation that would endure long after the exam was forgotten. In the harshest environment imaginable, they had discovered that adaptation wasn't just a biological process, but a social one as well. As she walked away from the viewport, Leah's thoughts were already turning to the next challenge. There were rumors of a volcanic survival exam being developed on Magmas Thur. She wondered what lessons from the ice would translate to fire, and what new wisdom might be gained there. Whatever came next, she knew one thing with certainty: the principles that had kept them alive on Glacius Thurimbin, resourcefulness, cooperation, and the willingness to adapt, were universal, transcending both planetary boundaries and species differences. In the vast, often hostile expanse of space, these were the true survival tools, more valuable than any technology or innate biological advantage. The cold had nearly killed them all, but in that shared struggle against extinction, they had forged connections that defied the very entropy that threatened them. Life, Leah reflected, always found a way, not just to persist, but to thrive through cooperation and shared purpose. As Captain Leah Turner reported for her next assignment, the echoes of Echo 1 remained with her, a reminder that sometimes the most advanced survival technology was simply the ability to work together across boundaries that once seemed insurmountable. The endless winter of Glacius Thurimbin had taught them all that lesson, written in ice and blood and shared warmth, a testament to the enduring power of cooperation in the face of a universe indifferent to their survival. And perhaps that, more than any medal or commendation, was the true measure of their success. The Academy's training grounds stretched before her, filled with cadets from 100 worlds, each with their own strengths and vulnerabilities. Looking at them, Leah no longer saw aliens and humans, but future companions in the great endeavor of survival among the stars. The cold had nearly broken them, but in that breaking, something stronger had been forged, a template for mutual survival that would carry them all forward into the unknown reaches of space. With a final glance toward the ice plains of Glacius Thurimbin, Captain Leah Turner turned her back on the past and stepped forward into whatever challenges awaited, confident in the knowledge that, even in the coldest places in the universe, connection and cooperation could create warmth enough to survive. The ice had tested them, But humanity, not just human beings, but the shared spark of compassion and ingenuity that transcended species, had proven equal to the challenge. In that truth lay the greatest lesson of the extreme cold survival exam, a lesson written not in the academy manuals, but in the shared experience of those who had faced the ice together and emerged, against all odds, alive. The end of one test was merely the beginning of another. But Leah Turner and her diverse cadets had discovered a universal truth on that frozen world. In the face of overwhelming odds, it was not technology or individual strength that ensured survival, but the bonds formed between different beings working toward a common goal. That was the true shelter, not the ice cave they had built, but the community they had formed within it. As the Academy prepared the next generation of survival specialists, this lesson would be their most valuable inheritance, a reminder that in the coldest corners of the universe, the warmth of cooperation could mean the difference between life and death. The extreme cold survival exam had ended, but its impact would echo across the stars, carried by those who had experienced it firsthand and lived to share its wisdom with others. And in that sharing, the true purpose of the test was fulfilled, not merely to assess survival skills, but to forge the bonds that would ensure the continued survival of all sentient beings in a universe often hostile to life itself. Captain Leah Turner had not just built a shelter from ice and animal skins. She had built a blueprint for interspecies cooperation that would endure long after the ice of Glacius V had melted away. In that achievement lay a victory greater than mere survival, a glimpse of what was possible when different species set aside their differences and worked together toward a common goal. The Academy records would show that 32 cadets had survived the extreme cold survival exam on Glacius V, a statistic, a number, a data point. But what the records could not capture was the transformation that had occurred within those survivors. The understanding they now carried with them, that in the face of overwhelming adversity, their greatest resource was each other. As Captain Leah Turner reported for her next assignment, she carried that knowledge with her, a truth more valuable than any medal or commendation, a lesson written in ice and shared warmth, a testament to the enduring power of cooperation in a universe that seemed designed to enforce isolation. The ice had tested them, but together, they had prevailed.